Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Chicanery. We are your hosts. I'm Danny, and we have JT.
Hello again. We're back with another episode, and this time a whole lot of shit to cover.
Yeah, so we have the Children's of Alabama uh, Grand Prix, or just Barber for most folks, but also there is well, news cycle things because apparently IndyCar has been watching Formula One these last few months and said, hold Manatee light. And so, as a direct result, well, there are some news cycle things we got to cover. So, I suppose without too much further chatter, we should probably get into it.
Well, hey there, and welcome to Thinking About Buying, the number one and only retail store that exists entirely in your subconscious. Thinking About Buying is your personal place for all the things you're thinking about buying. Sometimes there's things you want to buy but haven't even thought about, and that's where I come in. People buy stuff all the time, right? Pickup trucks, horses, condos in Barbados. None of those things are more important than our favorite item here at TAB, and that's t-shirts. And not just any t-shirts, we're talking t-shirts from our great friends at Homefield Apparel. Now, if you don't know these folks, maybe you haven't thought about them, wink wink, before, you're gonna love them. You like sports? Well, they love sports. They have printed authentic designs from over 80 collegiate schools, and now they're doing motorsports lines as well. And what a better way to kick off the month of May from an Indianapolis based apparel company than doing a line for the Indy 500 that drops just a few short days away on May 3rd. And the best part about ordering from them is it's just as easy as thinking about ordering from them. You can go to homefieldapparel.com or their app, look at these designs, find one that you like, one that suits you the best, and order it just like that. And hey, be sure to use our code VLV24 at checkout or 15% off your first order. That's homefieldapparel.com and VLV24. Now, if you don't mind, it's time for my lunch break. Don't tell Art.
And so, I guess to lead off, first of all, is Teo Porcher, or apparently, according to the broadcast, Teddy Porkchops is apparently what they call him, which is just about the most cursed thing I think I've ever heard. Um, but at any rate, Teo Porcher is back in the number 6 Aero McLaren for Barber. Or was back rather, because as we record this, the Grand Prix has ended. But at any rate, yes, he's back. He acquitted himself pretty darn well at Long Beach, and I guess that was the opportunity to give him another shot, because Callum wasn't busy for Barber, was he?
I don't believe so, but I mean, I know the previous race he was busy, but I don't know about Barber. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But much like how we talked about it in the Long Beach recap. Teo was sort of the biggest mover of the race. He didn't qualify super well, getting used to the car and all that stuff. But yeah, he's figured it out. And I guess that is Arrow giving him kind of the green light to continue to take over in the number 6. But circling back to Long Beach for a sec, the Grand Prix, the Long Beach Grand Prix viewership numbers were released, and it was kind of rough. Apparently, it was an average of just a little over 300,000 viewers this year versus last year, which was a little over a million. It's like 1.03 million. Now, it's worth noting that last year's Grand Prix was aired on NBC, whereas I do believe it was just on Peacock this year, if I remember correctly.
On
No?
USA and Peacock. I think it
Uh,
was moved to USA because of some other thing that was going on at the time on NBC, so they couldn't air it on NBC. So that's why that was the reason for the change. However, I'm gonna say it's probably not worth freaking that, like having like a freak out over viewership numbers, because like sometimes they are low, but it's like a lot of times it's like that doesn't really give you an accurate assessment on how well a series is doing based off of how many people view it, because, well, like, a lot of people, like, these numbers are, I think, based off of like cable, and a lot of people don't watch cable anymore. Like, most of the race, like, the most people use like streaming services to watch racing series now. Usually, like, for me, pretty much all the racing series that I watch, I use a streaming service of some sort, or I'm finding a pirated stream and watching it that way. And that obviously is not going to show up in like whenever they're doing like the calculations for like how many people watched it. So it's like there could have been plenty more people that watched it. It's just that, again, it doesn't show up in that number because it's only accounting for cable viewership. And it's also like, well, maybe IndyCar should just go ahead and like start streaming some of their races on YouTube, like IMSA has started doing. So it's like, that wouldn't that wouldn't hurt them to do that. And especially since like some of it can be a little bit challenging to watch if you're not in the US. So it's like, I don't know, they could do that too.
Yeah, it would certainly help. I know uh, our British friends, Sky Sports, has a broadcast service where they basically it's effectively just a glorified rebroadcast of NBC, Peacock, USA, yada yada yada. Um, so yeah, but YouTube would probably help. Of course, that would be useless to us here in the US because of broadcasting rights, but it probably would. Um, it's so funny. I know, much like we've established, I don't think it's quite uh, the cause for alarm bells that I know a lot of folks have sort of signified. But I am struck just by the sheer delta. For reference sake, a little over 300,000. You're talking about half, a little more, actually a little less, sorry, than half of the population of the city of Detroit, and then 1.03 million. That's roundabout the city of San Antonio population. So it's funny to see just the big difference. But again, understanding the extenuating circumstances, it kind of makes sense. Um, but what doesn't is the fact that IndyCar figured out how to trip on itself in a completely different manner. Um, So I saw this. I saw this on Twitter, and I'm actually very happy this made it into the notes. But apparently, IndyCar missed an opportunity, a particularly kind of a marketing tie-up with somebody. I don't remember who it was.
The person's name, I think, was like Monty or something. At least that's what they go by on social media, and I think he's some kind of like comedian of some sort. And like, I think he was with somebody else who, like, he's like, maybe was his friend, or like was just like had connections with him, and they basically sent IndyCar an email like inquiring about, like, I don't know, being in like the paddock and stuff like that. And IndyCar never responded to them. So they actually ended up sending an email to IMSA instead. And funny enough, IMSA responded back to them within like 40 minutes of them sending the email. So IMSA was able to take advantage of the opportunity that IndyCar fumbled. So I'm like, good for them. But it's like, it's kind of infuriating to an extent that like something like that they missed out on something that really should have been like such an easy slam dunk marketing opportunity that practically fell into their lap. All they had to do was answer up the email, and they couldn't do that. And the consequences of that, of somebody else took advantage of it.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know what year IndyCar still thinks this is. Like, it's wild that you've got, I think a Seinfeld movie or something. It's that stupid Pop Tart thing. Um, and a Bon Jovi car, but you have effectively a more modern media personality who's like, "Hey, I want to do stuff," and it just goes completely unnoticed. Never mind the fact that I can't think of anybody who, within most of the viewership core of IndyCar at this point, that like unironically gives a toss about Seinfeld or Bon Jovi. Like honestly.
And I saw somebody on Twitter mention, like, I really did not agree with what they said about how, well, maybe IndyCar wanted somebody who was more like related to motorsports, I guess, and like like, they didn't want to like collaborate with this dude because he was like, he's a comedian, and again, he doesn't really like, he's not really related to motorsports in any way. And it's like, well, it kind of doesn't matter because like this dude apparently has like at least a total across like all of his social media is like over like 36 million followers. So it's like that would have helped like something. And honestly, like with the state of where IndyCar is currently, they can't really be too picky about who they want to be in the paddock or help market the series. So it's like they're really supposed to be targeting like younger demographics, like people who are in like their like teens and 20s and shit like that. And that's like the key demographic that they need to be targeting if they want to stay afloat. And it's like this person, and it's like, I mean, maybe people don't really find this comedian dude funny. I personally don't know anything about him, but I'm like, hey, he has lots of followers, so that is something. Like you can, that would be beneficial to the series because it's like, okay, maybe, you know, obviously would be getting, more audience. Like he has a TikTok too, which like IndyCar also has a TikTok, which I'm like, great, because there are a lot of like younger people on the app. I mean, bar all the drama that's going on with TikTok currently in the US government, but there's still like a lot of like younger people who are on that app. So it's like that would help because it's like if people saw him at an IndyCar race, people are like, oh, I wonder what that is, and then they would be interested in it. So it's like I don't really agree with the whole, oh, we can't have people who, are not motorsports related trying to like be in the sphere of motorsports. It's like, no.
Yeah, which is funny because I don't know, because there's been so much overlap these last few weeks. But wasn't it Long Beach? Wasn't Fluffy the honorary starter? Fluffy Iglesias for
I
Long
don't
Beach?
remember.
I seem to think he was. I mean, I know that man likes him some Volkswagen Samba bus, but other than that, he doesn't have much motorsports crossover. It's just Fluffy. And then, I mean, and of course, given that Fluffy hasn't been particularly relevant in about the last 15 years either, you can argue that that also does signify part of the problem. But yeah, it is. It's just dumb because it's funny. We talked about this with Lauren back around Christmas time, but IndyCar is very much a series that seems to be surviving in spite of itself. Um, certainly if you haven't listened to that episode, you should go check it out. It was kind of a fun one. But yeah, no, IndyCar seems to be surviving in spite of itself. You have what is fundamentally a pretty good product, but it just gets completely undone by IndyCar. What feels like their complete and utter lack of willingness to like do something like link up with a comedian that's mega famous, and it's like assuming because once again, as we have gone through great lengths to point out that we don't really know anything about him, but it's like assuming he is not just like very obviously horrendously problematic. That's going to be kind of fun and like very easy, but just completely ignored, and I I just don't understand it.
Yeah, and then I don't know. We haven't necessarily the series hasn't said anything about it, so I don't know. And they probably won't say anything about it, but I'm sure even if they did, it'd probably be something along the lines of, "Oh, like we missed it. It's an oversight." And it's like, I don't know. If you like, okay, again, if you have to pay somebody to just answer emails and that's their only job, like they clock in, they check the emails, they answer it, and they clock out, then do that. Like I at this point, whatever it takes. Like if you need to pay somebody that just looks again, checks emails and that's all I do, fine. If you gotta pay somebody who just looks at social media and sees what people say about series and feedback and all that, if that's what you pay them to do and that's all they do, then do it.
Yeah, I don't know. Same. I don't know what it would take to get them to just make like very basic, intelligent decisions. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should create just whole departments dealing with this kind of stuff because it feels like it probably wouldn't get done otherwise. Uh, but yeah, but that's just I say an amusing anecdote. It's as amusing as it is frustrating, if I'm being perfectly honest. No real reason for it, but anyway, shuffling right along. Luca Giotto was in the number 51 Dale Coyne racing car for the Barber weekend. It's funny, I don't remember hearing like any announcement about it. I just kind of remember seeing it, and I was like, Luca Giotto in the 51.
I think they
I
just made a social media post about it, and that was it.
Yeah, yeah. There's like no fanfare. So was there any particular story, any reason, or is he just driving the car just cuz? It's like the shuffling about with drivers is a bit weird.
I have no idea. I guess the random wild card Dale Coyne signings are back.
Yeah, cuz I was just like, this feels very random. Um, but at any rate, moving on to the big news. TM. So if you've been anywhere near motorsports news in the last about week, then you simply have not been able to escape this, and you already know where we're going with this. But Team Penske got in trouble. Um, so yes, there was some pretty hefty post-race penalties from St. Pete. Both the number 12 of Joseph Newgarden and the numbers 3 of one Mr. Scott McLaughlin were disqualified from the St. Petersburg Grand Prix because they violated the push to pass parameters. And so, for just a little bit of further context, the way push to pass has worked basically since its inception about a decade ago now is that you have push to pass and blah blah blah. It's 200 seconds. It's basically 200 seconds. You push a button overboost feature. Truth be told, most forced induction streetcars have that. It's just controlled by the ECU and not you. In most of those instances. But point being, it's like right when you're coming up to restarts, push to pass is not enabled. It's a software thing where basically you get to, I guess, IndyCar's equivalent of the restart zone, and to basically keep there from being some real messing about on restarts, it's not available. But for whatever reason, in this instance, the Penske cars were, well, and not for whatever reason. Actually, we'll get to that in a sec. But they were able to use it and bugger off away on restarts, and that goes quite a way towards explaining why, particularly Joseph Newgarden was so catastrophically dominant in that race. Um, but as for the how, um, the IndyCar test, the hybrid test at I guess what was that, Indy Motor Speedway back in August?
Yeah,
Um,
I think so.
yeah, it was where they were goofing with the push to pass, but somehow the software was never reverted, which means that ostensibly these uh, goofballs have been running around with illegal push to pass for 8 months now, which is absurd. Um, Now, for what it's worth, IndyCar said that they had a look, and they couldn't detect any performance anomalies, I do believe was the wording that was used for that, basically those last handful of races to close out the season. Not entirely sure if I buy that, but also then retroactively messing with the season is a slippery slope, and they might not have wanted to open up that can of worms. Um, but at any rate, certainly the astute among you will be wondering why I haven't mentioned our favorite angry Australian, Will Power. And that was just because he had only copped a 10-point deduction because, at least according to whatever litmus IndyCar was using, to extrapolate performance advantages with using the push to pass on the restarts. Apparently, they deemed that Will didn't gain anything. I'm not really quite sure how that works, but I don't know. But at any rate, it means that Pato Award is effectively the retroactive winner of the St. Petersburg Grand Prix, which, what a heck of a way to score a race win. 2 months after the fact, near enough. But
I guess we should note that this was announced on, I think it was Wednesday of last week, so it was like April 24th, the days leading up to the Barber GP, just as reference whenever this gets released.
yes, which will probably be soon because, well, there's more stuff, and I don't really want this floating around on the editing palette. So we're gonna get that shuffled off promptly. Um, but yes, so as of the time of this episode goes out, it'll probably will have been a full 7 days because I'm hoping to get this out in time for Wednesday. We'll see. But yes. Now, there was a lot of chatter on socials about, well, why in the French toast did it take you guys so long to figure this out? Because apparently nobody noticed, or at least I guess more accurately, IndyCar was alerted of the violation during warm-up sessions uh, at Long Beach that Sunday, which push to pass was unintentionally inactive, but yet Penske somehow still had access to it. Um, though, for what it's worth, apparently another team had raised concerns about something funky going on with the Penske's back in 2023. It's all very, very funky and very, very odd. I feel like somebody here is completely full of it, if I'm being perfectly honest.
I mean, I do know who I have suspicions on who I think is full of it, but I'll hold off on it for now.
Okay. Well, because my good friend here knows that I love me a little bit of a rule book legalese. She was so wonderful as to include the direct rules that Penske was in contravention of. So Rule 14, paragraph 19, subsection 15. Oh, I love that. Um, a indicator to enable push to pass will be sent via CAN communication from the timing and scoring beacon to the car and the team data logger. The signal must be passed onto the ECU unmodified and uninterrupted during all street and road course events. That's thing number one. And then the very next subsection is that race starts and any race restart that occurs before the lap, prior to the white flag, or prior to 3 minutes remaining in a timed race event, will have push to pass system disabled and will be enabled for a given car once that car reaches the alternate start finish. So basically, IndyCar tells teams and cars, okay, you're good for push to pass, and don't do it before this point, is the best broad summation of those two rules. Now, Tim Cindric, which is the president of Team Penske, released a statement when this bombshell dropped on the 24th that, quote, unfortunately, the push to pass software was not removed as it should have been following a recently completed hybrid testing in the Team Penske Indy cars. He would also go on to say that the software allowed for push to pass to be deployed during restarts at the St. Petersburg Grand Prix race when it should not have been permitted. The number two, driven by Joseph Newgarden, and the number three, driven by Scott McLaughlin, both deployed push to pass on a restart, which violates IndyCar rules. Team Penske accepts the penalties applied by IndyCar.
And this is where I'm gonna say who I think is completely full of it. Is Tim Cindric. I'm sorry. at least the point where he's saying like the push to pass software was not removed as it should have been, like it was some kind of error or oversight from the team. It's like, I'm sorry, I just do not buy that. Considering the fact that as big of an organization as Team Penske is, they probably have like minimum like 5 people working on each of their cars. And you're telling me nobody saw that? Like out of all the people that touch the cars and look at like the software and the coding, nobody caught that? Like that's very hard to believe if you ask me.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know a lot of folks following the wave of, statements that came out throughout the course of, particularly the course of the morning on the 24th, really wanting to hold the drivers' feet to the fire. And like to some extent, I kind of get it because much as I mentioned, the push to pass procedure hasn't changed. It's been 11 years because it was the start of the season in 2013, I do believe, when push to pass was inaugurated. Um, So it's been a long bloody time. And so certainly they should have known better too. But also, um, yeah, acting like just nobody saw that within, yeah, like I said, mechanics and data, all the data logging that happens with this stuff. I have a difficult time with too. It reminds me a lot of Option 13. For those of my F1 history nerds, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Um, Long story short is lots of driver aids, FIA getting a bit pissy about it. Max Mosley banned said driver aids. He was the president of the FIA at the time. This was before he tore his reputation into shreds. Um, but then the Benetton team had basically launch control, which was banned for 94. Still buried very deep within the code. And it was speculated that Ferrari and McLaren may have also been doing something funky that season too. But yes, but it was basically hidden deep in the ECU. Um, and that's kind of what this feels like, which is oops, how did that get there? but But at any rate, like I said, there was quite a bit of fallout from this. McLaughlin and Power put out statements on their socials pretty much immediately after. And then it was Friday the 26th. I might have got my dates correct. Numbers are hard. Um, and he did a press conference talking about it. And, to be fair, he definitely seemed remorseful. I have lots of thoughts and feelings about kind of that whole thing. But I feel like I might be paraded in the Times Square and then shot if I voice too many of those. So I'll probably keep that to myself. Um, but yeah, it was lots of everybody very apologetic, and we promise we're not cheaters, and we'll do better, and just that kind of stuff.
I mean, honestly, I feel like some of this, like, I don't know, like a lot of some of the fallout I feel like could have been mitigated if like honestly they had just been like honest about the fact that they about what they did. I mean, I know maybe that's easier said than done, but at the same time it's like, okay, like you did cheat because it's like, okay, there's like rules you can go back to in the rule book that point to exactly what rule that you violated. So it's like, yeah, you cheated. And it's like everybody in racing cheats. Like it's just a thing. That's how racing is in order to like gain a little bit of more of a competitive edge over everybody else. So it's like, yeah, you should just like admit that you cheated because you're trying to get a one up on everybody else. And it's like, okay, you just say that and move on, honestly. Like, I don't know, some of like the way they went about, I guess, like their attempt at doing damage control and stuff like that kind of just made it worse, honestly.
Yeah, it all felt so horrendously performative. And I guess that's probably my biggest issue with all of us. You know, it's like, yeah, you got busted and and, to be fair, given this modern, very highly PR trained sort of media landscape that we exist in, do I exactly expect them to be like, yeah, fuck you, we cheated? Not exactly.
No, like honestly, I'm not shocked at the stuff that Joseph said because it's like, okay, some of it, like, yeah, sure, I'm sure he's like remorseful, but it's like at the same time, the statements that the drivers put out is definitely like, yeah, it definitely like it's PR trained, it's clean cut, it's statements that you would expect them to make. It's like, yeah, I'm sure somebody sat them down. It's like, okay, just say that. Okay, I mean, like obviously behind the scenes, yeah, they cheated. And I'm pretty sure more people than they are letting on knew about what they were doing. And it's like, okay, the PR side of it, it's like, okay, just say that you didn't know. Just feign ignorance. Just say that, you used the push to pass, but like you really didn't know. Because one of the things that he did say during the press conference was like, he thought the rules from Thermo Club were applicable to the full season. And it's like, okay, was this because somebody on the team told him that the rules had changed, or was it because that he pushed the pass button and it worked and that's why he came to that conclusion? Like, I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know, and that's part of what probably about all of this. That particular bit is might be what frustrates me uh the most, to be completely honest, because I know that they had done some different stuff with push to pass for Barber because it was an exhibition race, it was a non-points race, and they were pretty clear about it. Now, I mean, granted, the race was boring as anything, so it meant that the commentary team was actually like useful at Thermal Club because there was sweet bugger all else to talk about. But I yeah, I don't like. I don't understand that. Like I said, the only way that that really makes sense is because yes, if somebody within Penske, either race engineer or whatever was like, yes, this rule has changed, then it makes sense. But I'm like, otherwise, it's like, why on earth are you pressing push to pass on a restart anyway? Knowing that, again, the rule has been pretty unilateral, well, not pretty unilaterally, completely unilaterally for the last 11 years that coming up to a restart, push to pass is inactive. Like, if you
And
understand,
that part of it is very much unknown. And I guess some of the fallout also is because like this is, I guess, maybe from some people, like it's considered like unusual behavior from a team like Team Penske just because of like their reputation of being so like clean cut and straightforward and very like straight to the point and strict with, how they usually go about running their race team. And it seems odd that they would do this, even though it's like, championship winning teams cheat. There, there have been championship winning teams that have cheated before, and Team Penske will certainly not be the last championship winning team to cheat in racing either. Like I mean, that part of it's not really that shocking.
yeah, no, it's not. And certainly people are talking about this. I raised the Trans Am class, SCCA Camaros that Roger ran in the late 60s. One of them was like stripped out and acid dipped. That car was such a clear flaunting of the rules. And Roger had actually won a Trans Am title previous to that. Still cheated anyway. I mean, and that is a car that lives in, well, it's not really even infamy. It's arguably one of the most famous of that Trans Am era, one of the most famous cars, rather. And so, yeah, no, this is nothing new. I understand some of the dismay because Roger like owns IndyCar. But again, that's not gonna stop old boy. So it's like, yeah, probably barking up the wrong tree. But it's funny the reactions from the paddock. Everybody was very upset about this because there's a whole range of statements that came from it. Basically, all of them negative. Zach Brown tweeted, "Quote: How does the saying go? I was born at night, but not last night." which is kind of funny and feels very peak Zach Brown. We had the old saying, Ron Dennis speak when talking when he was head of the F1 program. It feels like we need like Zach Brown isms because that's what this feels like. Like I literally read that in his voice. Um, Graham Rahal, um, Nepo Baby in Chief, stated, I didn't appreciate the excuses that were made because I don't think they are valid. You're just digging into a hole that's absolute BS. I don't appreciate that. If you screw up, fess up, move on with life. And to be fair, he's kind of cooking there, I think, actually. Because then for further context, this was after the Newgarden press conference.
Yeah, this will probably be the first and last time that I ever am on the same page with Graham Rahal and say that, I agree with what he's saying because I'm sure he will go later on in the season and completely fuck it up and say something that's like completely stupid and ignorant like he has said in the past. And then I'm like, yeah, that's why I only agree with you one time.
Yeah, but no, I thought he was spot on with that. Then Colton, well, Colton did not mince words. He said, and this is from Colton's mouth, not mine, but he said, "quote No, that's bullshit." He's like, "That's wrong." He said, "If he thought that," or you said, "Why didn't he push it at the start?" He didn't. He did it at the restart. You'd think, you'd think when everyone is stacked up the most, you would. So that's a lie. Um, so Colton, yeah, his once again, I think he's absolutely right, and clearly he was well, he was kind of feeling a type of way after the press conference because he was suspicious of the Penske cars after being passed on the first restart. He thought that Chevy had just done something in the off season that made him better on restarts, and he said that he had talked to his teammate Kyle Kirkwood about it.
Which I
So
think is like very interesting because like that makes me think that maybe what like had allowed Team Penske and like their push to pass manipulation to go under the radar for a little bit longer than it did was the fact that St. Pete was such a like boring race and it was so calm. Because I'm sure because if they were using that on restarts, I mean, there were not that many restarts in that race to begin with. Like I think there were max like one or two restarts because of like full course yellows from like minor incidents of somebody getting into the wall or because a car was like it stalled and had stopped on track. So it's like if there had been more restarts for them to use the push to pass on, I feel like people would have definitely caught on to it sooner because it's like it would have been more obvious unless they, made a huge effort to like, be sneaky about when they used it in order to throw people off their trail. But I'm like, that's honestly made me, I was thinking about that just like the other day. I'm like, maybe they would have been caught sooner. Just like maybe the fact that the race was so calm happened to just work out to their advantage.
yeah, absolutely. If this had been the 2023 St. Pete race, they would have been busted immediately. But yes, but so this is kind of the nonsense that was going into the Barber weekend. Um, very much kind of hanging over the heads of Team Penske. But well, to get started, McLaren yet again, and truth be told, Andretti, they had bigger issues. Given that both teams only had one car make it through to the Fast 12, which is not good. Whereas conversely, both Meyershank cars made it through to the Fast 12, which is like, okay. Uh, Graham Rahal was being whiny and annoying, which is like, okay, fine. What else is new? Um, but all of this ended with a shock Scott McLaughlin on pole, um, which I'm sure probably, given the events that had transpired earlier that week, I am almost certain raised some eyebrows. Um, But then moving into well, I guess before we get started into the nitty gritty, the customary question: good race or no?
I mean, I would say yes. I mean, it was a little bit chaotic,
So yeah,
and
you got
there
your chaos
were,
race.
yeah, and there were like a lot of people who were driving a lot worse than I feel like they should have been driving, but we'll get to that.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I struggle a little bit with this one, this race. Yes, it was very chaotic, and after a boring St. Pete, an absolutely atrocious thermal club, and then a very good but quiet Long Beach. The lid finally blew off of IndyCar with this past round. It's like everybody was just finally sick of behaving themselves. Um, I still think ultimately it was a good race, but this tests my limits of the amount of chaos that I will allow. Um, but at any rate, getting into the nitty gritty, both Willpower and Felix Rosenquist had an engine change. I seem to recall somebody did a gearbox change. I don't remember who that was. Um, but I
I don't know. I
remember,
only saw stuff about Willpower and like Felix Rosen was having engine changes. I think Willpower was like the engine was like misfiring or something, and the clutch was like messed up, so they had to do it.
yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I'll have to go back and look. I'll have to pull up, see if I can find a rebroadcast, because it was in the countdown to green, and if I can find it slash remember to find it, I'll insert a little something here. But yeah, so that was for sort of mechanical stuff. Lap one, turn one was silly. Renus VK got in the Stingray Rob, and then who then got pushed into Jack Harvey and Kiffin Simpson. VK got the penalty, obviously, but possibly the only time that Stingray has been involved in something, and it wasn't just him crashing all on his own.
Foreshadowing.
Indeed. um, but
Maybe it was VK that was the one that got the gearbox change because I remember like he was starting way back in the back for whatever reason. I don't know if you
yeah,
get shuffled in the back if you have a gearbox change though.
yeah, I don't remember, but like I said, I'll look it up and then I'll stick it somewhere. And maybe I'll cut this bit out. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll be Chaos Queen and I won't bother at all. We'll see. But anyway, um, but yes, the chaos was, well, like I said, it was a chaotic race. Pato Ward spun to avoid driving into the gearbox of Christian Lundgaard. He was just entering with way more speed. I don't know if he outbraked himself. I know he had a little bit of a lockup. I don't know if that was because he moved the steering wheel in the braking zone or what. But point is, he was backwards and into the kitty litter, as were several drivers that day, because Scott Dixon later in the race had an off in that same spot. But then Santino Ferrucci was just flipping on one this race. He was drove into the side of Colton Herta, which was so funny because Colton was having absolutely none of it and pushed back. Was there a car that he didn't bounce off the side pods of this race? Because I'm not sure there was. Yeah, yeah. And Pato Award would have another incident, and he would uh, end up getting into Pietro Fittipaldi, which would send Fittipaldi into the tire barriers, which I do believe was responsible for the first yellow of the day.
I
Um,
think so.
yeah. Like I said, more folks were off in the gravel. Like I said, Scott Dixon, who was running 7th at that point, had a bit of an off and spun. And then some other excursions off into the gravel because somebody went very, very wide, almost hit the barriers. I can't remember who that was.
It might have been Rasmussen.
I think it was, yeah.
Pretty sure it was because he went in the gravel, but was able to like keep it going and not get stuck, and then like went like way like oh
Yeah, he's like way along the outside. Like I said, he was practically skimming the Armco in that spot, that section. Um, then there was some contact between Joseph Newgard and Marcus Armstrong, and that caused Joseph to eat a bit of grass because Armstrong was on the alternates, and Newgarden had just come out on a fresh set of primaries, so he just didn't have like any grip. But he was really, really trying to fight the point, and Armstrong just shuffled him off into the grass. Um, but we got a full course yellow at lap 43 for a the wheel, like the whole wheel just came off of Rossi's car, which is wild. I'm like, huh, we're having loose wheels and IndyCar now. It's like apparently some of the NASCAR pit garage clearly were at Barber for the weekend. Uh, but yes, that brought out a full course yellow, which during that cycle of stops, Canapino spun it on pit road and almost annihilated a couple of MSR mechanics. But there was just lots of pushing and shoving from drivers all race. I don't know if like everybody was in a bad mood or something, but
Mercury was in retrograde.
yeah, it was one of the more elbows out races I think I've seen in a while in IndyCar. Kind of felt like Nashville to some extent, or I guess 2022 Nashville, Crashville. But then, arguably the best point of the race. Well, I guess a little bit of context. The guy who owns Barber is an eccentric fella. I'm sure you'll notice in the panning shots, or if you've ever been to Barber, there are lots of curious art installations dotted about the place. You've got some gigantic metal spiders. You've got like gorillas, like a la King Kong, hanging off of things. It's all very, very strange. But then you have the arguable highlight is Georgina the mannequin. She hangs out on the back straight, basically dangling underneath a pedestrian footbridge that's elevated over the circuit. Well, somehow it is not quite clear to me or anybody else, but she managed to escape containment and fell onto the circuit. And then shortly thereafter, had her hand obliterated by Scott McLaughlin's left rear wheel and probably wing to some extent. Now, no harm, no foul. Well, I say mostly no harm, no foul, because our girl did lose her hand, but there was no damage to Scott's car as a result of the race car on mannequin collision. Now, I tell you what, because the way she hangs from the thing in the camera shot, she's usually mostly hidden. So when she fell onto the circuit, even though I know Georgina is there, I have watched many Children's of Alabama Grand Prix, I forgot that she was there.
I didn't know it was always there. I thought it was just there for this weekend.
Yeah, no, she's been there for a while, from what I understand, at least the last couple of years. But yeah, I lost my mind watching what, well, funny enough, looks kind of like a person falling onto the circuit. And I was like, oh, wait, that's right. It's just the mannequin. But I suspect our Miss One, Mr. Barber will probably be asked to not put her back by IndyCar officials after this. But that being said, there was a fabulous shot of Scott in the media center holding hands with with Georgina.
I don't know. Maybe that's gonna be the cover photo for this episode.
That should be, actually. Ha! Yep, that'll be the cover photo. But yes, I genuinely thought that was the highlight of the race. But moving back onto that, We did indeed at lap 55. We got our obligatory Stingray Rob single car accident. Um, he said that the wheel broke, which he sounds like a certain Frenchman that made a similar excuse last year at Portland, I think, who said the exact same thing before he stuffed it into the barriers at basically the exact same angle, actually. So I'm not sure how much I believe that, but it's also worth noting that it was actually kind of a big hit, and I am glad he's okay. Um, but this did scramble up the field a little bit because Rasmussen and Ferrucci, I think. It's either Rasmussen and Ferrucci or was it Lundgaard and Ferrucci? I don't know. But it was Ferrucci and somebody were running this really weird, like, third strategy of basically just stay out for as long as you feel like, and maybe something will happen. And it was looking for a second like it might work because I was going to be in shambles if I had to record a Ferrucci win today. Um, but it didn't work because they got boned by the late race caution and got shuffled back to the field. And it all wins in or ends rather in Scott McLaughlin winning and ostensibly doing so like legitimately this time. So, I don't know. I know there are, some storylines about redemption for Team Penske. I don't know. But certainly, I don't know. It makes for a fun story, if nothing else. But at any rate, I guess moving on from the race, we are dusting off sort of let's start a dialogue for the not great driving standards this race.
Yeah, it reminded me very much of like Sebring because it felt again, like I said earlier, there were a lot of drivers who were driving way worse than like they usually do. Like for example, like Pato. I don't know what was going on with him this weekend, but it was just like awful, like absolutely atrocious racecraft that he was displaying. And to be fair, a lot of other people were, displaying awful racecraft as well. Again, for whatever reason, I don't know. I'm just gonna assume that because it was just so much like pretty much just pushing and shoving and elbows out. Everybody just decided at one point, like at some point in the race, fuck it, it's everybody for themselves, and just turned into an absolute bloodbath or melee. I mean, Pato ran into a bunch of people like at the beginning, and he also at one point I think ran into Teo Porcher, like he ran into his teammate again. And I'm like, again, I mean, there were some incidents that like I'm pretty sure like collisions that happened between various drivers that I actually left out just because there were so many that I lost track of most of it. Like there was like I mean even like Joseph Newgarden and Marcus Armstrong, like that wasn't the only collision that Joseph Newgarden had. He also had one with Blomqvist and basically shoved him off the track. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what was going on that weekend. Okay, on Sunday, but it was just a lot of mess. It was a lot of mess, and unfortunately, I'm gonna have to say very poor racecraft from pretty much the entire field.
Yeah, it was like we were watching IndyCar and then a NASCAR race kind of broke out somewhere in there. Although truth be told, with the way that those cars in aero, you'll spin before you were actually able to get that close. Anyway, but yeah, I completely agree. It was just like I said, lots of beating and banging. There wasn't a car that Ferrucci. No, that's too nice. That sounds too cool. Ferrucci, sorry, didn't bounce off of uh that day. Yeah, Pato was just driving like garbage. Newgarden wasn't driving super well. It is just not. Yeah, it's just bad. I think that is probably the best summation. Is that?
I mean, some of it, I feel like maybe the reason why Joseph Newgarden wasn't driving so well is because like he could have been like it could have been like the stuff that happened like earlier in the week with Penske and their penalties, and like he could have been like very flustered and just not in the great headspace, and that's why he wasn't driving that well. As far as it goes for everybody else, again, I don't know. Everybody, I mean, again, I lost track of how many like on track collisions that people had, how many times people, went off the circuit and did some little, you know, off-roading excursions. It's like I don't know. I
Yeah.
honestly do not know.
Yeah, I don't get it either. I don't know. I think all those drivers thought that the gravel needed to be raked. It was looking a little bit uneven, I think.
I don't know. They decided that the racing line was going to be in the gravel, I guess.
We were watching an IndyCar race, and then a rallycross race broke out in the middle of it.
And then the crazy thing about like all the beating and bang that was going on, it's like, guys, do you realize you're racing in open wheel cars and you can't beat and bang like you can in like GT cars or stock cars? Like you will actually fuck up your car real bad if you do that.
Yeah, thankfully the cars are pretty good about, mostly because the tires have gotten wider over time. So it's not the, crazy wheel on wheel somebody, goes to space the way that it was, heck, even, 20 years ago. But, but yeah, it's just, yeah, like you said, you will break your car if you do that too much. So yeah, I don't know. I guess there was just maybe there's something in the water at Barber. To be fair, Will Power said that he had a case of he was getting over a case of food poisoning before the race. But then again, I think he was the only one that didn't get into something. So
I mean, he went off track a little bit,
actually,
but I
that's
don't
not
think
true.
he
That's true.
ran
He
into
did. Uh-huh.
anybody like everybody else was doing.
Mm-hmm. But yes, so chaotic race, yes. Kind of fun, yes. Even a good race, broadly speaking, yes. But driving standards for Barber, no, absolutely not.
A very poor race, perhaps.
Very.
I mean, I'm probably gonna have to put that race up there with the top races that had like the worst racecraft ever displayed. Like honestly, I mean, it's not number one. I don't think. Like I've seen worse races.
Mhm.
Like definitely still the top one so far until something else knocks it out. Is the 2022 DTM Norris Ring race.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But moving on to certainly the post post race stuff, we woke up to an incredible headline this morning. Arrow McLaren has terminated David Malukas. Uh, Unfortunately, basically as a result of his injury and taking longer than expected to heal. They're moving on. So and if you certainly haven't been paying attention, if you don't remember, like what was it, like a week before the start, before St. Pete? I think it might have been less than that. David Malukas was doing some extracurricular activities in his off time, and he went basically ass over tea kettle on a mountain bike, and he jacked up his hand pretty badly, from what I understand. Um, And so it was expected that he would probably miss St. Pete and possibly Thermal Club, but the idea is that he would be back for Long Beach. Now, that didn't happen because, as mentioned earlier, his hand is taking longer to heal than anticipated. Everybody heals at different rates. These things are not uniform. But yes, as a result of this, um, Arrow McLaren has chosen to sever ties with David Malukas. There is a clause in his contract where he could miss only up to 4 races, which is curious because I guess that means we count Thermal Club ostensibly if you do the math. Which I'm like, I figure given that's a non-points race, that would give him a stay of execution, but I guess not.
I mean, that was very weird. I remember people pointing out. I saw today was like, okay, now we're considering Thermal Club a race when it's like I thought it really wasn't considered a race because it doesn't award points. But like I have no idea.
Yeah, it's very odd. Now certainly you and I have talked about this on this show before, but uh Zach Brown and contract fuckery name a more iconic duo. And that's kind of what this feels like, if I'm being perfectly honest.
I mean, yeah, I did say like apparently that they severed ties with him because if they kept him like longer throughout the season and then cut ties with him at that point, that they could possibly be setting themselves up for like legal problems, and end up getting sued for false promises. So like a lot of this has to do with them trying to avoid even more legal problems than they are already in.
Yeah, which I mean, I guess so. Again, I think it sucks, and it's just a long line of drivers who have frankly gotten kind of screwed over by Arrow McLaren. Um, because Oliver Skew got dropped when he was dealing with concussion symptoms, which I absolutely abhor the way IndyCar handles that. Because to be fair, Oliver is not the first or last. I mean, we saw Simon lose his seat um, as a result. Then, Hinch wasn't notified that he would be getting dropped until it was basically too late for him to do anything about it. So,
Yeah, and that's only just the IndyCar side of
yes,
McLaren. There's also the whole side of drivers that they've fucked over in F1.
exactly. So, I have a hard time saying that they were justified, quote unquote. Um,
I mean, I
but
guess technically they were like they had the right to do it because it was in the contract that he signed with them, and it's like, I would not. I don't think I would say that race car drivers are complete morons and don't know what they get themselves into and don't know like and aren't signing contracts with teams without like a second or third opinion. So, I mean, I get that. Also, it's kind of funny to me that Arrow McLaren in their statement, nowhere in their statement did they mention anything about the clause in the contract that David had with them that, that triggered them to have to terminate him after missing Barber. So it's like, if that was the reason why you did that, I feel like it probably would be pretty important to mention that in the statement. Like, it doesn't make it any less like shitty and doesn't make it feel any better, but it would help their case a little bit because it's like I had no idea that was the reason why they even did it in the first place up until I saw a tweet about it, and news articles saying okay that this was the reason why he was terminated. It's like, yeah, it would have helped if they had mentioned that in a statement somewhere.
yeah, I completely agree. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, like I said, this just all feels so icky. I guess is probably the best way I can think to phrase it. Um, I don't love this. And contract or not, I still feel like David got kind of a bad break here. I'm hoping that we'll see him get signed on with another team. I guess basically for next year.
I mean, it's possible that somebody mentioned that, that you could possibly see him in like the Dale Coyne 51 car again, since like he used to be there, and he could, for all intents and purposes, pop up there at some point in the season if he is able to recover well enough to be able to like drive and obviously have like full range of motion of like his
Mhm.
wrist and stuff like that. um, and then as far as it goes, for another thing that Air McLaren, I guess, saying is that they wanted stability and consistency from the six car, and that's why they let him go as well. And it's like, I don't really know how you're going to be able to achieve that now, considering the fact that now you are going to either have to like find another driver from wherever else and sign them for the whole rest of the 2024 season, or alternate back and forth between the drivers that you already have put in the car, like Porcher and Ilott, who are notably, they are already full time in other series. Like Ilott is full time with Joda in WEC, and then Porcher is full time in Super Formula. So it's like, I don't know, you'd have, if you wanted them, you'd have to maybe buy them out from the team that they're already with in those respective series. I mean, I honestly don't really see, I don't know. I don't really see them doing that. So like really what they'd have to do is end up alternating drivers. Like basically you will like revolving door of drivers that you have going in and out of the six car, which again, it's like that really isn't going to help with the consistency and security that you're looking for. Cause I mean, Ilott would likely be the one to do the 500 because he has done the oval testing at Texas Motor Speedway, which, you have to do oval testing at Texas Motor Speedway in order to be eligible to do the rookie orientation program at IMS. And Portier hasn't done that. So obviously he's not going to be able to, fill in for the 500. And obviously it probably, at this point in time, we're at the end of April going into May. It probably would be too late at this point in time to try and, get Portier any kind of testing done on an oval and then, you know, do the rookie orientation program at IMS, considering the fact that most of the rookies have already completed and, done that, wrapped it up, I think in the off season or, way early on in the year. It's just a little bit too late. So for the 500, probably Ilott because, he'll probably be free at that time. June, he probably won't be free because he is again in WEC, and that's going to be time for preparing for Le Mans. And Le Mans is a pretty big race, like everybody knows. So they will probably have to pull in Portier or somebody else at that point in time. For the rest of the season, I don't know. And again, really does not help the whole case of consistency and all that because again, it's still going to have to be again alternating and doing a revolving door type deal with the drivers that they're going to be putting in the seat.
Yeah, exactly. So, certainly if their aim was stability, if anything, releasing Malukas has completely obliterated that as a potential option. Because at least if he was healthy enough a little bit further down the line, I mean, he'd be back in the car and that would be that. But now they don't have anybody permanent as a direct result of this. So, congratulations, you played yourself. Well, at least that's kind of what it feels like, certainly. But yes, to be fair, Arrow McLaren had released a statement. Given that I've already roughly outlined sort of the contents of which, if you're curious, want to go read it for yourself. I mean, it's not hard to find. Um, even by the time this episode goes out, it should still be pretty easy to pull up. But the very final paragraph sentence was that Arrow McLaren is finalizing its driver assignments for the remainder of the 2024 season and will announce confirmations for upcoming races in due course. Now, that doesn't sound particularly reassuring, but hey, what do I know? Could be fine. Probably isn't though. But yeah, just like I said, just stinks. I feel for David.
I mean, part of me is kind of glad that like Felix Rosenquist is not with McLaren anymore because it's like I don't know. The way they treat their drivers is kind of questionable, at least in my opinion. So it's like at least he's with Meyershank and he seems to be, happy. He's doing a lot better than he was at McLaren, and everybody seems to be happy again. And Tom seems to be a good teammate for him. So
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the only real lesson I feel like I gain from like any time that there's some garbage with a driver, and McLaren is, yeah, they seem much happier not at McLaren. Although to be fair, anytime you look at anything, Alex Rossi looks like he wants to die. So there, I don't know, there could be that. Uh, but
and then
but
somebody said you're just keeping Pato there because they're dangling the F1 free practice in front of him like steak to keep him at the team.
yeah, probably. He's not getting it though. Never.
I mean, unless somebody, unless either Lando Norris or Oscar Piastri ends up, in another unfortunate similar situation to Malukas or Daniel Ricciardo and he has to fill in for them, then it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think it's happening. But I guess that it's gonna about wrap it up for a purely IndyCar episode of Chicanery. It's funny, it feels like we're double and triple dipping on the series in one episode. So to have a little stability and just talk about one for, an hour and a bit is feels kind of novel. Huh.
I
It
mean,
is
I'm
something.
glad that I only had to do at least like one helping of notes for this weekend and not like two like I usually do.
Yeah, I'm sure it's nice. And to be fair, because well, I don't do these notes. It means I didn't have to do anything, but it's okay. The notes gods are gonna want their pound of flesh because after this episode goes
It's
out,
Miami, and
it is my.
Miami's a sprint weekend, and you hate writing notes for the sprint weekends.
Yes, I do. I don't enjoy it at all. It's so miserable because 3 sessions gets pulled out until like 6 that I need to write for, and it takes forever. I'm already not looking forward to that. It's only Monday as of when we're recording this, Monday the 29th, and I feel the onset of crippling depression. Fabulous. Alrighty. Well, on that bombshell, I think it's time to end. We have been your hosts, Danny and JT, and this has been an episode of Chicanery. Until next time, everyone.